Hey guys, it's Gary Duke. I hope you're having a good morning. We are right back here at Straightforward Therapeutics, still talking about hope for the troubled mind. I was thinking that maybe the last video was going to be the last video in this series. Every time I think I've reached the end of this little series that I've been doing, I keep getting more and more ideas as to what people might be struggling with and maybe something that could be said to help them in their struggle. And today is an interesting one. We've talked about bipolar, we've talked about depression, anxiety, codependency, various things. Today's something that a lot of people really aren't that familiar with probably, and it's called an existential vacuum. An existential vacuum. That sounds like a really long 8-cylinder term. But if you wanted to really boil it down to a common meaning, it's a sense of a lack of significance and purpose in your life. A sense of lack of significance and purpose in your life. And you know, when you're living your life with no purpose or seemingly no purpose or significance, it in itself is very troubling because you know, you don't have any passion, you don't really have. I've had people come to my office to do individual counseling, and over the years I've learned this, that, you know, when they begin to describe what they're going through, and, you know, it's not depression, you know, it's not really irrational thinking, it's not this or it's not that, and it becomes apparent that what this person is doing is they're struggling with their meaning, finding meaning in life. And that can create a lot of melancholy, you know, mediocrity. I don't know how you want to describe it. Just a lot of feelings of really just not having any joy, And you know, as a counselor, you know, you think you got like therapeutic tools and stuff to help people when they have, you know, struggles or certain theories and things and interventions and whatever that we can employ and try to help somebody. But whenever I recognize the fact that this person is suffering from really an existential vacuum or a lack of significance and purpose, I only have one answer, and that's God. Because God is the one that made you, and He's the one that created you and has the blueprint for your life. And there is no one that God made that He doesn't have purpose for. You know, the worst person on the planet, whoever that person might be in your mind, God has purpose for them. Now, have they found that purpose? Maybe not. You know, they may not have discovered, you know, they may not have discovered God, first of all. Because in order to really find out the purpose for your life, you got to really discover the person who made you and created you. And so I want to talk about that a little bit today. There was a guy in World War II, his name was Viktor Frankl. Some of you may be familiar with his story. He was an Austrian professor, and he was actually captured by the Germans. I don't remember if he was a Jew or he was helping the Jews, but at any rate, he was in a concentration camp, and he fortunately was not exterminated, but he was there for a good while. And they would do, you know, sometimes hideous experiments on him and stuff, you know, without any painkiller or whatever. And, you know, Viktor Frankl began to recognize the fact that he could dissociate, and he would go back to a classroom, and while these folks were working on him and maybe causing him pain or whatever, he could go back to in his mind to a classroom where he taught a particular lesson, and he would teach that lesson in his mind. He also recognized the fact that people around him survived longer when they recognized that they had a purpose for living. You know, Viktor Frankl, my favorite things about him is that he discovered that maybe the German guards had more liberty. They could move about freer because they were the oppressors. But because of the power that he discovered in his mind and the power to choose how he was going to respond to certain situations, he discovered he actually had more freedom, because they were kind of like mindless robots that were just doing what they're told. He could choose how he was going to think about something and how he chose to react to it. Viktor Frankl really kind of created the concept of being proactive and choosing the right response to every situation. But I'm getting in the weeds a little bit here. I want to get back to the existential vacuum. I remember when I was lost and undone, and I was often drinking, using drugs. If I was fortunate enough to have a lady friend, I could be at a party and maybe have everything that I think that I need in order to have a good time. Drugs, alcohol, companionship, whatever it might be. My friends are around me. The music is blaring. They're playing, my favorite blues tune or whatever. And everybody's laughing, and there's a lot of camaraderie because it's a party atmosphere. But many times there would be just a moment of time, just a brief moment of time, a few seconds, where I knew, even though I was lost and undone, I knew there was something missing. It's like, even though all of this is here, there's still something not right. It's often been said that there is a vacuum in our heart, in our being, in the core of who we are, that only God can fill. I believe that. I believe that people are never going to be totally satisfied until they come to the realization that they need God in their life. But beyond that, once we discover God, we also have to discover why God created us and what our purpose is. And you say, well, how do you do that? Well, back in the 90s or whatever, there was a lot of talk about discovering your spiritual gift. You hear a lot of things, destiny. Discover your destiny. I actually hate that word. I'm not sure that word's even in the Bible. I don't even think the word destiny is in the Bible, to be quite honest. Okay? And I don't know how many people had sermon series on finding your destiny. Well, listen, because it almost seems like it's already charted out and all you got to do is just get on the right road and you're automatically going to get right where you're going because you are destined to get there. Now, the Bible does say we are predestined to conform to the image of Christ. That it does say. But as far as our life work and our activities, what we're focusing on, what our passion is, you say, well, how do you know that? Well, let me ask you this. Here's some questions you could consider. First of all, if you could do anything in the world, anything, no holds barred. Oftentimes we start ruling out things right from the get-go because we think, I don't have the opportunity, I don't have the money, I don't have the time, whatever. Forget all that. Forget all that. If you could do anything and there was no obstacles or barriers whatsoever, what would that be? What is the passion of your heart? What would that be? You say, well, man, for me, I've always, I don't know that it's ever going to happen, but, I'm almost 70 years old. If I could choose the ending to my life, I think I'd like to go to Africa or some country like that and just be able to counsel people and, maybe AIDS victims or people who have been through severe trauma or whatever, and just end my life trying to give back something to somebody who's in dire need. I don't know. That's probably not going to happen, but that's the passion of my heart, see? To give, to use whatever I got to try to give back to somebody who's in need. That's why this channel exists. It's not because I'm a YouTube influencer. I hope I'm influencing somebody, but I'm never going to have the numbers that most people have. That's okay. The goal is to try to leave some breadcrumbs so that somebody coming after me might pick up something and get some good out of it. So what is the passion of your heart? If you could do anything. Now, here's the second question. What is your motivation? What is your motivation? Because some people would say, well, if I could do anything, I'd be a Wall Street stockbroker, or I'd be a doctor or a lawyer. Well, why, what's your motivation? Well, because they make a lot of money. That's why, So let's look at that for a second. The motivation of your heart has to be in tune with the purpose of God. Okay? And so God is a giver. That's who he is. He's a giver. And so when he places a passion in your heart, he's going to do it, not saying that you're not going to get blessed by doing it. If you follow God's path, you're generally always going to be blessed. Maybe not as financially blessed as the guy who's seeking out the stock market job or whatever. That's okay. God knows what we're capable of and what he can trust us with. And so that's not a problem. You don't have to be rich to be blessed. Okay. And so, but if your motivation is right, my motivation is to serve God, is to be a blessing to people around me, to make a difference in the world that I live in, to give back to somebody. See, now that's a good motivation. That's a good motivation. So if I've got a passion and I say, this is what I'd like to do, and the reason why I'd like to do that is because I think it would make a difference in the kingdom of God and touch people's lives. Okay? It would make a difference in my family or whatever. Okay, here's the third thing. This is not a question. The third thing is, if you have a passion and you got the right motivation, you realize that God placed that in your heart. He birthed that passion in your heart. Okay? And you got the right motivation. You're not just trying to enrich yourself, promote yourself, get a position, be somebody on a stick with a bag of chips. Bag of chips. All right. If that's your motivation, I got good news for you. God has already placed the talent inside of you. The talent is there. Now, here's a key, okay? Just because the talent's there does not mean it's ready to be used yet. It has to be developed. If you look at any great pianist or a musician or artist or whatever, those people had to develop their talents. You have to develop it. But I can guarantee you, God placed something inside of each one of those people. They had a passion. They had a desire. Most people, honestly, when you talk to artists or musicians or whatever, their goal is not to get rich. Maybe some of them. But, the majority of them, man, it's all about the music. Or it's all about the art. I just want, I want to put something out there that people are going to enjoy. And so, the key is to, first of all, find your passion, make sure your motivation's right, realize that you do have that talent, and then you ask yourself, what do I got to do to start working on developing that? Oh, hey, you want to get some energy and some joy going in your life? Okay? Start focusing on trying to move that ball just a little closer to the goal line. Say, what can I do? Well, how about some online courses? How about signing up for some Bible classes? How about asking to be mentored by somebody who's doing exactly what it is that you've got going on? How about getting online and just starting researching and seeing where the greatest need lies and what you're willing and capable of doing? As you begin to delve into that, you begin to realize that, hey, you know what? This is doable. This is doable. I could possibly do this. Remember the VIM model, V-I-M. Okay, I know I talk about it a lot, but it's so true. Get the vision. Have a vision of how this would change your life and the lives of people around you. Be intentional. Commit to it. Decide that you're going to do it. That is going to be something that you're willing to pursue, and that you are going to pursue it with all that's within you. And then finally, the means. Look and see what kind of methods you can employ in order to do this. You know what? I heard something some time back that said that the average child spends over 10,000 hours playing video games by the time they reach 18 years old. By the time they reach 18 years old, they have spent over 10,000 hours. Now, let me ask you, if you spent 10,000 hours doing anything, you would be pretty good at it. I believe I could learn how to be a brain surgeon in 10,000 hours. You know, I could probably be an astronaut in 10,000 hours, not at my age, but when I was younger. And, you know, if you apply yourself, you can achieve just about anything. And if God has placed that in your spirit, if He's placed that in your heart, if that's the goal, man, hey, listen, God's on your side. Where the finger of God points, the hand of God will provide, you know? And here's something else. You see this white beard, okay? Age is not a problem. Age is not a problem. You can still do something regardless of how old you are or what you've done in your past. I had a great Bible school teacher by the name of Gene Cantor, who was an awesome, awesome man of God, one of the greatest men of God I ever met in my life, and if not the greatest, to be quite honest. And I remember sitting in a class one time and him talking about a stone cutter, a diamond cutter. And he said, you know, if they find a diamond in the rough, okay, a chunk of a diamond, a big old diamond, you know, they take it to the stone cutter. And the goal of the stone cutter is to cut that diamond, cut the facets in that diamond in such a way that it's the biggest diamond possible. Because a bigger diamond is worth a lot more money than a bunch of little bitty diamonds, okay? So he said, you know, if in the process of cutting that diamond, the stone cutter makes a mistake, or there's a flaw in that diamond, and the part of it chips off, you know, what does he do? He doesn't throw it away. He takes it and he makes the very best he can out of it. And that is exactly what we need to do with our life. And so I know people who's made some pretty serious mistakes, and I have made some very serious mistakes in my life. But you know what? God can still take what we got, and He can still use it for His glory if we will commit to it. And age is not an issue. My wife went to the same Bible college I did. There was a man who was a New York policeman who got in the Bronx, and he ended up getting saved and retiring from the police department. After he got saved, I think he got saved after he retired. And anyway, he started, you know, seeking God. He was like 60 something years old, man. And, you know, he'd lived a sinner's life all these years. But he got turned on to God, got turned on and he's like, you know, hey, you know, I'm retired. And he's had a passion to know about God and to study the Word of God. And he said, you know, I got nothing going. I'm already retired. I got a pension. I'm going to go to Bible college. And so he went to the Bible college that I went to. He was like 60 something years old. And, you know, and I was 33 when I went to Bible college. The president of the college was the same age as myself. And you know, and I'm sitting in a classroom with a bunch of 18, 19-year-old kids pretty much. And it was a little daunting. And but you know, he was 60 something years old, went there to Bible college and he had so much wisdom from all the years that he had lived his life as a policeman, and just wisdom that you gain from 60 something years. And so after he got done with going to Bible college and graduating, they actually asked him to come and teach at the college. Did you know that some of the textbooks that my wife used when she went to Bible college was written by Brother Wilmerton? And so, you know, so can God, and he was like 80 years old. I don't know how old he was when he passed away, but he spent another 10, 15 years maybe teaching at a Bible college up until he was 60 something years old, perhaps. He had never done nothing for God. There's never too late. It's never too late. Now, we're talking about an existential vacuum. I'm going to wind it up, okay? When a person comes into my office and they're sitting there with their head down, I just don't feel like I got any use. There's no significance. I've got no purpose. You know, I don't even care about anything. It just seems like I'm so apathetic, you know? And I realize this is what's going on with them. if they get in tune with God, if they seek the passion that God has placed in their heart, if they begin to pursue it with all that's within them, I want you to know something. There's no way that person's going to come back in my office and be hanging their head and feel like that they're defeated and they've got no purpose in life. God will give you a purpose. He will give you the purpose that you need. And you talk about joy unspeakable and full of glory. When you are pursuing what God has called you to do, you will feel joy. You will have a focus. Your whole mindset will change. I hope you got something out of this today. Hey, take your journal, sit down. If I could do anything for God, what might it be? Look at what you got to do, what your motivation is and what you got to do to pursue that. And I can guarantee you this, that God will help you if you will pursue it. I hope to see you next time. God bless. Bye-bye.